The Community Strategic Plan is the community's vision for the Central Coast for the next 10 years. It's called One Central Coast because this is the first plan for the whole of the Central Coast. We are one region, one council and one community. We live in a special place here on the coast, one in which we want all members of our community to feel valued and have access to a range of opportunities to participate in the richness of community life. And every one of us can play a part in bringing this community vision to life.
If people feel part of a community in some way, they'll give without probably even knowing they're doing it.
I wanted to restore this building and get it back to what it was. It was the jewel of the crown, and I wanted to get it back to that. Making a difference. I guess that's what we're really here for.
The smile on the faces when they see these engines and that bus coming around, they just love it.
If you're following what makes you happy and excited and interested, then you're definitely going to live a life that you will be thankful to have lived.
At the end of the day, we just had a good idea. We needed the support of many people to turn that great idea into a sustainable venture. My name's Tim Silverwood. I grew up on the Central Coast. It wasn't until I got a bit older and started travelling around the world I realised that what we had was so special because people don't always treat the environment as well as we do here on the Central Coast. Our programs have focused on going into schools and running events in communities. We also have a huge global online audience. One man cannot solve these big global problems. It's going to take a tribe of people coming together to solve them. It's a really amazing and rewarding journey in spreading this message around the world.
I've always been on the coast and I've loved the coast. About 6 years ago I bought the Chapman building. I got the opportunity, I saw that it was for sale and I stood back on the car park up there and a village central and I looked down and I could just feel this was the place to be. I could just see what the town was. There's always these little niches that are going back and forth and I guess it's an obsession for all of us because we saw what Wyong was like and it's getting it to a place where we're proud to say we're from Wyong. Like it's become a real proud place to be.
My name's Chris Wallace. Myself and my wife, we own Community Fire Education and the Fun Engine. We educate the community in a different way. We teach people what to do in case of fire. One of the biggest things is our education bus. What we do, we go out to different fates, festivals, wherever we can go. When we do the bus sometimes, we get 2,000 through that bus. I just enjoy communicating and getting out there and just educating in a different way.
I'm Meredith Gilmore. I've lived on the coast since 2000, originally from Sydney. Chose the coast because it's close to Sydney, but it's got that more laid back kind of thing that I like. I like living in regional areas. I started visual art in my 40s. It's just so different from what I ever thought that I'd ever do, and it is what led me into thinking it would be great to talk to people in the arts on the radio. So I started doing some shows, particularly a program called Coast Arts, which was a new show, and I reached out into the community because I'm an artist as well. And I just felt like there was a lot of scope on the radio to do interviews with artists and poets and writers, and that's been going now for over 7 years.
My name is Shauna O'Brien. I am from the Central Coast of New South Wales on Dark and Young land, and I'm a dancer. As an Indigenous dancer, we're very inspired by the environment and where we come from, all of the trees, the way that they curve around all of the rocks and the sea faces, the beautiful water, the fresh air, and that plays a huge part in the creative process. I was lucky enough to study at NASA Dance College, which was a super incredible experience, and the facilities, the studios are really beautiful, the staff are incredible, and I feel very privileged to have had that opportunity. Through volunteering, I was able to meet a bunch of really great other young people in the community that are really passionate about helping other people, and that's a way of taking something that I'm very passionate about and sharing that with other people. No matter where I go to work or if I have to spend a lot of time in Sydney, I always come back to the Central Coast because it feels like home and it helps rejuvenate me.
One of the things about the Central Coast I've noticed as well, which is people are so helpful to each other. They collaborate. They are interested in going to each other's exhibitions, not just to see what people are doing, but so that there are people there. And you've got to be competitive, but you don't have to always be competitive with each other.
If you're in a position to make a difference, I guess you're obliged to make that difference, really. Just happy to, give it all I could, and it became, a local icon and a bustling place to be.
The Community Strategic Plan is the community's vision for the Central Coast for the next 10 years. It's called One Central Coast because this is the first plan for the whole of the Central Coast. We are one region.
Start the public forum. Thank you. I declare the public forum open. Welcome to the public and those watching by webcast. While this is a public meeting, it is a meeting for the purpose of hearing from registered speakers, and I ask those members of the public present to not interject in that process. I remind those that are in the chamber that your image and what you say will be broadcast live to the public and is also recorded, so please be mindful of what you do and your comments. You should avoid making statements that might defame or offend, and note that Council will not be responsible for your actions. If I could ask you to switch off mobile phones or onto silent, as they tend to interfere with the sound system and can make it hard to hear what's going on. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge the connection that we all have with this land and this place and our shared responsibility to care for it for future generations. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest with the items on public forum? And those items, it's item 4.3, Terrigal Boardwalk. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? None. Then I note the following people have requested to address the public forum: Mark Lamont against the recommendation, item 4.3, Terrigal Boardwalk, and Sally Jarmain also against the recommendation, item 4.3, Terrigal Boardwalk. Mr Lamont, I now invite you to come to the microphone. I remind you the meeting's being live streamed and recorded, and you have 3 minutes, and I'll just get your microphone switched on. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors, staff and members of the public. I live in Terrigal. I've spoken in this place once before. I believe the proposed Terrigal Boardwalk is over the top, that this would be a pedestrian version of the M1 freeway, wrapping its way around the very popular and relaxed natural rock platform nook that we have there in Terrigal. It's a very popular spot for locals, especially on sunny days, and tourists flock there. It's not unusual to see the tourists down there with their blue and white Crown Plaza towels that they brought from the hotel with them. Now, no doubt they're going back and spending more money. And when I say an M1 freeway, I don't think a lot of people realise that the proposed boardwalk, it has a deck which will wrap right around, which will be 12 inches thick, a concrete deck. There will be 600 millimetre, 2-foot round concrete piers, I think every 7 metres. That's pretty heavy material. It is going to totally change that whole spot. And it's going to start wrapping around before the rock pool and work its way around like a runway. Last time I was here, there's a lot of talk about surveys and what the people feel. And this percentage, the majority thinking this and that. But not one poor soul, not one person surveyed was ever told that the proposed boardwalk will block all access, existing access, popular access to the natural rock platform itself. It is a place where people go to chill on the warm rock, to mix my metaphors. It's a place where people relax. A place I stood last Friday afternoon at sunset with the mayor and members of staff and observed children playing on the rock with their parents, with one father carrying his baby there. And I was thinking back to 50 years ago when I was a kid, and we used to play on the rock and count crabs and dangle our feet over the sides and do all the things that kids do. And then I I read in my letterbox the touting from a local member claiming that this was going to be a wonderful win for people with mobility issues. I got great sympathy and compassion for people with disabilities. I've served them in my teaching career years ago, have someone at home with a disability. But I really do object to the idea that we have to pit one group in society against another. Why are we putting ourselves in a situation where we're saying, well, people with mobility have a right to go out to this wonderful spot, even if it means creating this massive ramp out there, but it's going to mean that the children will no longer be able to play on that rock. There'll be fencing on each side. The council proposal specifically says there will be no public access to the rock. And so I asked the question, why were the survey respondents not told that information? That's a really important piece of information. I call it a stitch-up. Follow the sequence. The piece in the letterbox. It's a done deal, the local member said. It's going to help people with mobility. What about the children? I think back to my children, my childhood. I think of my grandchildren, and they're not going to see it. They're going to, you go to Facebook, you'll see pictures of that rock like it was like that 100 years ago.
Mr. Lamont, your time is up.
So I just say, when people talk about the survey, remember it was a dud survey. When they talk about mobility, remember the children. When they talk about tourism, remember there's been no economic study. And all this talk about jobs and tourism, it is just hearsay.
Thank you, Mr.
It is already a really popular tourist destination as it is. Thank you.
Now, I think there are a couple of questions from councillors. Councillor McLaughlin, let me just get your microphone.
Thanks, Mark. I know you're very passionate on it and you spoke about it before. You may not be aware, but I think we have taken some consideration into what you're talking about with access. And there may be some amendment to allow access onto the rock. Would you be agreeable to that sort of thing?
Look, I've thought about this. I'm split. I'm even split myself in terms of some kind of a way for people to be able to get down from the rock onto the beach, something really low key. Others here in this place probably don't agree with that. I'm not anti-tourism, I'm not anti-business and development. I just know that it's a place that is really special. And I've spoken to people about the idea of creating somewhere where you can sort of step off onto the rock, but you're still going to have this massive pedestrian motorway, concrete structure that's wrapping right around. And so there's no point. I mean, you go there, it's like putting something massive over Uluru. It's just not the same. You can say, well, you can still step down onto the rock, but it's just not the same. And look, okay, I'm pushing it, trying to make a comparison, but I don't get to go to Uluru. It's a long way away. We go to the rock. That's our really relaxed place. It's a place of significance. It's the only place in the photos that hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin, was there a further question?
No, thanks, Mark. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Best, you had a question for the Speaker? Sorry, Mr. Lamont, I'll just get you to come back to the microphone. There's a couple of councillors.
Thanks, Mark, for coming this evening. Mark, Uluru, yes, you are stretching it. Either side of the rock platform, there's stone walls. There's all the concrete wall around to the surf club, and then on the, if you were on the platform, it'd be on the right-hand side. There's a relatively new sandstone, 4-stone high tiered wall in front of the Reef Restaurant running to the ramp.
Yeah.
Did you oppose that going in recently when it went in only a few years ago?
I wasn't aware of that. Was one I missed. I did.
It's pretty obvious.
I did live overseas for a couple of years there in the gap, but no. And I would say that that it's a very different proposition. We're talking about a natural rock feature, which is a very popular place and a very unique place. As I said last time here, it's the only rock platform in the whole area which enjoys the protection of the bay, low energy waves, place where kids can go out and play without getting knocked over like the fishermen do around the main area. It's a place that's north facing, yet it's the last place in Terrigal to get the sunshine in the winter sunset. And it's a place people just go out to. You can just go out there most afternoons and see that it's very popular. It's the only quiet place. It's a really popular nook. So
thank you, Mr. Lamont. You've answered the question.
That's a good enough answer.
Councillor Best, you've done. Councillor Sundstrom.
Just in relation to your take on how the community feels about this proposition, are you aware of, could you give me an estimate of a ratio of people for and against this project, just in your experience?
Living in Terrigal, talking to people there, I work from home most of the time. I spent a lot of time out at the beach, and at the start, people just didn't seem to know much about it. It was like, oh yeah, there's this thing that's coming. It was almost like we're just going to take it. And then we started to find more out about it. But now I don't really know anyone who's really wanting it. I see a lot of commentary online about people who just don't want it. I talked, when I walked away from our meeting last Friday afternoon, 2 people come up to me and said, they can't do this. It's the wrong thing to do. The real problem is that we don't actually have balanced information. We've got to have the right evidence to make these sorts of decisions. Putting a survey in front of people with some pretty pictures and perhaps some sentiment about the possibility of jobs and the fact that the state government maybe is putting in some money, a lot of people will say yes to that. I get it. But when you put the full case, you put it out there and say, look, yes, there may be a promise of jobs, there may be some additional tourism, but on the other hand, it's going to mean that there's going to be no further access to the rock platform, and subject to any changes that may occur tonight, it's still going to be pretty poor access in that you're going to have this big concrete thing wrapping around you. I mean, I don't even know whether I'd want to go and sit out there and relax anymore if I've got a big concrete thing going. It's just a different people go there for a certain reason. Actually, probably only for one reason, and that is the one reason that will be taken from them by this proposal. With this imposition, this structure, it removes pretty much the only reason people go there to enjoy the rock.
Thank you,
Most
Mr.
people.
Lamont. Councillor Sundstrom, is there anything else? No?
Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Mark, for coming in tonight, and some of your discussion and dialogue there about the lack of an economic study. But the bit that got my interest was the survey, and you thought the survey was flawed. And so I was just wanting you to elaborate on that a bit more so I get my head around it.
Sure. I read the methodology and some of the background on the survey from the council report some time ago, and I made some notes at the time, and I may have written to council about it at the time, I think. I understand that certain photographs were shown to respondents, and there were some statements made, I think some statements perhaps made about funding opportunities that had come through, maybe some comment about the fact that it will provide, a viewing platform, and it was a nice glossy, it was a nice brochure. It was pretty impressive. It looks okay, in that sense, but it didn't actually say that this structure is going to prevent people using the rock platform as we have for decades. And that's a really big piece of missing information. And then we're asking people to actually give their thoughts. Let me put it to you this way. If the survey had, someone came up and said this to you down at the site on a day, folks over here on the rock platform, do you think that they appreciate that site? I mean, locals would say, yeah, it's a pretty popular place to go. It's a quiet nook. People talk about it being a relaxed nook, a place to chill. So if this boardwalk was to block all access to the natural rock platform, people would no longer be able to sit on the platform, lay on the platform, sun on the platform, crawl around, count crabs. Kids would go and have a swim in the summer, then they go up and they spread eagle on the rock because it's warm, and they go back and forth. All of that will stop. All of that will stop. If I put that to you and said, do you think the boardwalk's a good idea? Well, I've just given you one side. So you're probably going to say, that sounds like a really bad idea. They should save the rock. So we can run surveys and get whatever response we want.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I've got a follow-up question. So from what I gather there, I think from what your view is that the survey was biased and it could be deemed to be a push survey.
Yes, I think so. And the fact that there was already public information from the local member's office that this was going to happen, and it was just a matter of process to get it through.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hogan, you've got a question for the Speaker?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. Thank you for coming in, Mark.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. My question is, we're often, having quite a lot of backlash because we knock back funding for different projects. So my question to you is that what other things do you see that money could be best spent in Terrigal?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I have heard that this boardwalk has been lumped in with other boardwalks and the economic benefits that other boardwalks in other places have created. I think everyone has to be looked on its merits as quite different. They're in different environments, different impacts. Some of these boardwalks actually open things up. But here we have a case of a site that's already very opened up to most people. Okay, not people with mobility issues, but absolutely a magnet for kids. And so I see that the way in which I've got an economics background, I own a couple of businesses in Terrigal, I get it. I think that the economic development and the tourist aspect of Terrigal could be looked at from a different lens, and that is understanding the value that the site brings currently, understanding the kinds of amenities that people who want to spend money are looking for, and thinking not just about, it's on a peninsula, there's one road in that most people come, there's one less known at the back, but it's still a bit of a bottleneck. And so we have to start thinking about not how we can get more people into Terrigal, but how we can bring people who are going to spend more in Terrigal, and how we can bring people to Terrigal for a greater period of the year, not just in the summer season. And so my mind turns to, we have some good cultural events, we have some great festivals, we could have some more. I remember going down and seeing Dragon on the beach one Sunday. The Sun Cancer Foundation sponsored it. Massive crowd there, and there would have been a little economic boom that afternoon with all those people. But you don't see music down on the beach anymore. There are great facilities there at the Crown Plaza, and most of those conference rooms and so forth, they're underutilised for a large part of the year. And I think that promotion of the wonderful asset that it is could generate, what is the calendar? I know there's a calendar, but let's book out the calendar and give people more reasons to come and celebrate Terrigal for the wonderful site that it is. I mean, this rock platform for years was the poster of the Terrigal postcard.
Thank you, Mr. Mott. Anything further, Councillor Hogan?
Oh, thank you, Mark, and thanks for pointing out the economic benefits of this boardwalk. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pillar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Mark. You mentioned about you're on social media quite a bit. Did you take part? There was a survey on Facebook recently, which I personally shared, knowing a lot of people in the area, on my councillor page and my personal page, which was unbiased, which people were asked to put purely, are you voting yes or no regarding that? Did you take part in that? And I just wanted to mention that the results on that survey was also in favour of the boardwalk.
I have responded to every survey I've seen on the issue, as you probably could imagine. Very passionate about this issue. I don't know whether I saw the one you're referring to. I do know, however, that I'm yet to see a survey that sets out 3 bullet points of here are the pros and 3 bullet points of here are the cons. I see a lot of, and I think that's the key piece. I mean, people will give all sorts of sentiments when they don't have all the information.
And sorry, just one other quick question. Do you use the rock platforms over near the Haven at all with your family?
I use them all.
Near the Haven?
I use them all, but they're different. You know, when you go out to the oceanfront rock platform on the other side of the Haven, around the back of the old boat sheds, it's a bit of a hike, it's a bit of adventure, it's higher energy. You've got to watch yourself. Not sure whether you can make it around because it's low or high tide, all the way back around to the Skillion. Yeah, we do that, and that's fun. It's great. But the rock platform we're talking about tonight is totally different. It has gentle lapping waves. Okay, there's big storms sometimes. We don't go out on those days. But every other day, you can sit out there. I see old people, young people, kids, and it's just a relaxed area. So we go there more often because you just walk straight onto it. Kids. When my kids were younger, we'd grab an ice cream and we go out there and have an ice cream and look over the side and see if we could see a fish. Look out and see if there's any whales. We'd sit there, lay down, comment on the fact that so many people would just sit. There's all these little natural ledges you can sit and look out, and it's just the way that people, relax in Terrigal. I don't think that kind of rock feature. I haven't studied it, but I don't know any other rock feature in Miles that's so protected and popular and handy. I mean, it's a really popular strip. Yes, the beach does have the faux stone wall along it, and we understand why that happened. There's history involved, but this natural rock, it hasn't been touched. You can look at photos on Facebook today that show it, I think, 100 years ago.
Councillor Pillen, has that answered your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. The usage of
Thank you
other
very
rock
much.
platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. You can take a seat.
Thanks very
Ms.
much,
Lamont.
everyone.
Next speaker is Ms. Sally Jarmain, speaking on the same item. Ms. Jarmain, I remind you the meeting's being live streamed and recorded, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The construction of the Terrigal boardwalk will have a devastating effect on the heart of what makes our town unique. This development will strip cultural, historical and environmental layers from our township. It will hollow out the incredible opportunity that we have as a local community to utilise a safe and private place to rest and explore. We've heard all sorts of reasons justifying this development. It has been offered up as a magic bullet for Terrigal's seasonal tourism and empty shops. We've heard from tourism experts who drew our attention to other supposedly successful boardwalks in other coastal regions, one of which was washed away. There have been references to the overwhelming majority of support, which has been measured in a loosely worded survey, which alluded to dreams rather than facts. The pop-up tent has been regarded as a good measure of public support, despite the fact that it recorded the opinions of only 441 people in a town of more than 11,000. Politically, this boardwalk already has shaky foundations, and that's even before huge holes are drilled into our seabeds. The momentum of resistance to this proposal has unearthed a depth of culture and history that we're responsible for preserving. Archival sources have surfaced detailing the way people utilised the cove and rocks of Terrigal over generations. Images of bonneted students in the 1920s studying the folds of the rock echo the actions of our local schools today. In this era of a dissipating connection with nature, it is our responsibility to nurture the developing environmental awareness of our youth. Bricking over their play spaces is a shattering message to young children who want to protect the land they love. There have been some odious comparisons to how Terrigal Boardwalk will compare to the Bondi and Byron Bay coastal walks. These walks stretch for over 5 kilometres. They complement their environment. When constructing these towns, at no point have their councils irrevocably changed the iconic face of their towns, bricked over a large portion of beach or limited play space for families. Terrigal Boardwalk is not an example of sensitive natural tourism. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. Terrigal Beach is known for its beauty. In fact, there is a huge roadside banner in Gosford imploring people to visit the Central Coast, which features an image of the untouched raw beauty of the very rock platform that some people want to cover with metal. Unfortunately, Terrigal is also known for having one of the worst standards of water quality in the state. When it comes to attracting tourism, this is the fundamental issue that must be addressed. Reassuring tourists that they won't be swimming in sewerage will have a positive impact on tourism. A 200-metre strip of metal and bricks leading to an already clogged car park will not. As representatives of residents of the Central Coast, it's important that you feel the weight of public opinion. This project has been fundamentally rejected by so many in our community. I have here a detailed petition which has over 850 recorded objections to the project. People are upset about the loss of nature, the loss of historical connection, the exorbitance of spending $2.9 million on a localised and unnecessary project with no evidence of proposed benefits.
Ms. Jarmain, your time is up. I need you to start wrapping up.
People are
please.
calling out for money to be spent on our northern suburbs, simple projects like restoring small urban green spaces. This is bigger than political manoeuvring. This is about representing the whole coast. This is about responsible implementation of spending. This is about setting the example for our future generations and preserving the magic of what we already have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sundstrom, you have a question for the Speaker?
Yes, please. Thank you again for coming and addressing us here at the Chamber. In relation to the tourism aspect to this proposed boardwalk, do you think that we can only increase tourism in Terrigal by building this boardwalk, or do you think there are other ways that that could be achieved?
I think there are many ways that that can be achieved. I think that Mark touched on a few of those ideas. Cultural events, preserving what we have in that small pocket of what's left naturally is a major draw card. We have visitors that come down from other places that have been spoilt as far as, you know, man-made structures being put over those little cove elements, and we still have that. And that's something that we need to preserve, and that's something that we need to celebrate in order to continue to maximise tourism of Terrigal.
And I would dare to say that a good council should look at a historic usage and current usage of a location before building on top of it. Do you think that this council has done that in this case?
I don't think there has been anything more than desktop studies. I'm not sure how much consideration has gone into the depth of the impact on the aquatic environment. I know recently it was being said that there's no seagrass meadows under there, but there in fact are a lot. I've seen them myself regularly. There are fundamental marine life there that we need to protect. Huge blue gropers swim around the base of that. There's lots of things there that we need to make sure that we're preserving and thinking about in depth before we make these decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Jamo.
Thank you.
Councillors, we don't have any further speakers, so on that I'll declare the public forum closed and we'll open our ordinary meeting at 6:30. Thank you. by webcast. While this is a public meeting, it is a meeting for the purpose of council decision making, and I ask those members of the public present to not interject in that process. I remind those that are in the chamber that your image and what you say will be broadcast live to the public and is also recorded. So please be mindful of what you do and your comments. You should avoid making statements that might defame or offend, and note the council will not be responsible for your actions. Please switch off mobile phones or onto silent, as they tend to interfere with the sound system and can make it hard to hear what's going on. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge the connection that we all have with this land and place and the shared responsibility we have to care for it for future generations. Councillors, are there any apologies? Obviously not for this meeting, but any leaves of absence? No? Disclosure of interest. Do any councillors or staff have any conflicts of interest to disclose in the matters under consideration by council at the meeting? Councillor Holstein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Notice of motion 7.1. I declare a pecuniary interest as that is the site of a current part-time employer of myself, and I will leave the meeting and not partake in any debate.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on item 4.4, volunteer section 355 committees, significant non-pecuniary, because the organisation I work for is noted in the report, and so I will leave the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan.
And also item 4.5, community support programs, less than significant non-pecuniary, because I know or have worked with many of the organisations. However, I'll stay in the chamber and I will be impartial.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillor Vincent.
2018. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Could I declare a non-pecuniary, less than significant conflict on item 4.5, community support grants 2018, I've lost a bit of time there, to 2019, for the reason that I have family who are members of the Wyong Writers. Full stop. Wyong Writers are a branch of the Fellowship of Australian Writers New South Wales Incorporated. I'm able to participate in the discussion and voting on this matter because there are no executive membership or decision-making within the Wyong Writers.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Greenaway. There.
I'd like to declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest in relation to item 4.5, the Community Support Grant Program, just by virtue of the fact that I have a lot of connection with some of the community members, but just to the point that I'm familiar with who they are, but I won't be influenced in any decision making, so I will stay in the chamber and participate in debate and voting.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Councillors, I don't have anybody further indicating, so could I take a motion that Council receive the report on disclosure of interest and note advice of disclosures? Move Councillor Gail Collins, seconded Councillor Pillen. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes of previous meeting held on 11 June 2019. Do I have a mover? Move Councillor McGregor, seconded Councillor Gail Collins. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Notice of intention to deal with matters in closed session. So we don't have any items to be considered in closed session. So could I have a motion that Council receive the report and note that no matters have been tabled to deal with in a closed session? Councillor Mertens, seconded Councillor Gail Collins. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Councillors, we will now consider those items on the agenda by exception method. So I will indicate those items that have been starred for discussion or debate. If there are any councillors have not nominated, you will have the opportunity to do so. So the first item is item 4.1, Records Management Policy. Item 4.3, Terrigal Boardwalk. Item 4.6, Tourism Opportunity Plan. And item 7.2, notice of motion kayaking, canoeing, tourism opportunities. Councillors, were there any others? Councillor Vincent, have you got your microphone on? Okay. Councillor McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to call up 4.7, play space at Johns Road, Wadalba.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Best?
7.1, I would just accept that any motions put up would be standard. Doesn't need to be called. 7.1.
You do want that starred? Nobody else is indicating? Yep.
Yeah, I would have thought that a motion written by a member of the board would be a natural part of the agenda for discussion. Yeah, okay. All right.
Thank you, Councillor Best.
And also, thank you, Councillor Mayor Vincent. I've got some questions on 4.4. However, I don't think those questions should be in the open chamber. And I'd ask through you, the director, whether the author of the report, feels that some questions should be in confidential, or whether we want to do the laundry in the open.
How about, sorry, Councillor Best, so what are you asking me? Without knowing your questions, I can't provide your advice.
Well, I'm asking you to the director.
Well, Councillor Best, why don't you call up that item and we'll deal with it when we get to it.
Well, I don't want it in open, so I won't call it if it's going to be in
So
open.
are you putting a motion that we debate that item in confidential? Is
Yes.
That, okay, so,
Please.
so I might just finish going through this and then we might have a motion to that effect. Councillors, was there anybody else wishing to call up those items? No? Then, councillors, I will just have a motion to adopt the following items en masse in accordance with the recommendations included in the report. And those items are item 2.1, draft urban spatial plan, a framework for the local strategic planning statement. Item 2.2, planning proposal. Before I do that, do we need to call that up and just formally defer it? So that will be called up, councillors. So just starting again, to adopt en masse, item 2.1, draft urban spatial plan, a framework for the local strategic planning statement. Item 2.3, proposed dwellings 71 Heath Road, Hardies Bay. Item 3.1, CPA 2137, installation of board piles, Shirley Street, Ourimbah. Item 4.2, investment report for May 2019. Item 4.5, community support grant program 2018-19, March, April and May 2019. Item 5.1, update on report due to Council Central Coast dredging. Item 5.2, meeting record of the Gosford CBD and Waterfront Advisory Committee held on 8th of May 2019. And item 5.3, record of the Community Strategic Plan Community Reference Group meeting 30 April 2019. Councillor, are you moving that way, Councillor Vincent? Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Gail Collins, all in favour? Any opposed? Councillor Best, did you want to move a motion that item 4.4 be considered in confidential? Yes. Do we have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Marquette. Any discussion or debate?
Is there any opposition?
Any, well, yes, I'm getting to that. So there is nobody speaking against, so I'll put that motion.
Well, hang on, if there's opposition, then I'll speak to it, but if there...
Well, I don't have any speakers against, Councillor Best.
All right.
So I'll put the motion moved by Councillor Best, seconded by Councillor Marquette. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette and Best. Councillor Sundstrom, what's your point of clarification? Yep.
If we're voting now on whether this motion should be looked at in confidential before it's been started, are we getting the
It has been started. It was just started as I went through those items, Councillor Sundstrom.
Well,
Yep.
may I just, before we put this down, could I possibly request my question I asked you before through you to the director? Could the director please advise whether they or she feels that this should be in confidential, having regard for some of the questions she knows that will be asked?
Through the CEO, Ms Vaughan, would you like to respond?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Best, if they're along the lines of a legal nature, as discussed earlier today, I would suggest that it probably is in the best interest to do that in confidential.
I'm trying to help, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Best. All in favour of that? Councillor Vincent, I've just got a question from Councillor Greenaway first. Councillor Greenaway.
We do try to maintain openness and transparency with our residents, so it would have been very helpful for us to be perhaps given a copy of these
Councillor Greenaway,
questions.
is there a question?
Yeah, the question is, why don't we know what we're being asked to put in confidential? Why are we getting asked to vote on something when we don't know the content of what we're being asked to talk about? You didn't give me anything, Councillor Best.
Excuse me. So the item is clear. What Councillor Best is moving be considered and debated in confidential. That's probably what you need to know at this point.
Well, I don't know anything at this point.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vincent.
I'll apologise. This afternoon I was not in the briefing, so I'm running a bit blind here, and I'm not sure if certain things were said in the briefings that I should know now.
Councillor Vincent, we're just not in debate. Is this a question?
Well, it is, because you wanted us to vote a minute ago, and I'm just trying to say I'm not sure what I'm voting in or the reasons why we should be going to confidential for this. We're a matter that's already got a report on the business paper, but through you, Madam Mayor, to the Director of Connected Communities, can you enlighten us at all?
Through the CEO, Ms Vaughan.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Vincent, not really, other than if the questions are of a legal nature, and I know Councillor Best has asked some of those earlier today, then I think it would be wise to take those in confidential. There were some general questions asked this afternoon as part of our agenda review, which are public knowledge, as is the current content of the council report. So it's difficult to really provide anything further than what I've said without knowing the nature of the questions.
So if this was discussed in open session and Councillor Best verged on areas that could be deemed confidential, then he could be advised when he's moving close to that or into that area?
Through you, Madam Mayor, definitely if there are questions of a legal nature that pose any risk, absolutely.
And if that part of the question needed to be answered, it's probably a question more for the Director of Governance, but we could move into confidential for that component of the discussion and then out.
Through the CEO to Mr Hutchings.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Greenaway, what's your procedural motion?
At least know what we're voting on. We don't know what issues he's raising. We don't even have a vague understanding of what he's referring to, other than legal.
Councillors, I am going to proceed with the current motion that we've got on the floor. If you want to enter in debate, then I need to give Councillor Best the opportunity to open debate. So can I just check, are there councillors that wish to debate this item? Councillor Hogan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director of Governance Evan, I actually need to leave the room and haven't had that opportunity to do so and to say because it's been going around the room. So I'm now declaring my interest in...
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. My apologies for that. Councillors, are there councillors that want to debate this item? Councillor Best, you can open debate. Yes, it is, Councillor Best.
Oh my God. I am normally very, very reticent to put things into confidential.
You might just wait till Councillor Hogan leaves the room.
I'm normally very reticent to put things into confidential, but the Director has had 2 attempts, councillors, at discreetly sharing with us the need for us to seriously consider not dealing with this thing in open. However, as members of a board, we are compelled by the community to ask questions of our bureaucracy. And when you look at this report, and we're not debating the report, but when you look at the report, you see that Council has not provided delegation to 355 committees.
Councillor Best,
Well, that's what it is.
We'll just caution you.
I understand, I'm cautioning myself, but I mean, people are saying they don't know why they're voting, and I'm trying to scout the issue to help them understand why they need to support this, and that is that if you haven't provided that delegation to the 355s, and the 355s have made a lot of decisions over
Councillor
here,
Best.
then you've got
Councillor
a problem.
Best.
And I'm not going to the detail, but if you haven't given that divested delegation, which the report says you haven't, we need to discuss that. But what will come from that, I don't think needs to prejudice the council's position. And if we do have that discussion in open, I'm very concerned that we will do exactly that. So it's just a matter of trying to protect our position. Clearly, an error has occurred.
Councillor Best.
What's what the report says. I mean, how do you debate this, Madam Mayor? Come on, you've been here 2 years. How do I debate
Councillor Best, I probably would have asked these questions during the briefing. But
well, I wasn't
please
here at
proceed.
briefings.
Yes.
I took the time to pick the phone up to the director, spoke to the director, and the director suggested, it's under Councillor Vincent and myself tonight in the chamber on the public record, the councillors, it would be best served for council's benefit to have this in confidential. And if you can't join the dots on that, then why are you here?
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Marquette, did you want to speak as seconder? Oh, sorry, Councillor Marquette.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to point out I was in the briefing, some of the Labor guys were a bit late and weren't there, but I was definitely there. And I think, Madam Mayor, if this is going to be debated, then I definitely agree with Councillor Best. After being in that briefing this evening, the information that was given to me was that the tussle that may be had on the floor can't happen out in the open. I also don't like putting things into confidential. I think I said that last night. But we've also got a responsibility to make sure that we're protecting the place here. So I really would urge all councillors to do the right thing, put this one into confidential so we can make sure we've all got a good footing with it, and let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marquette. Are there any speakers opposed? No. So I'll put that motion moved by Councillor Best, seconded by Councillor Marquette. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Sundstrom, Councillor Gail Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Best and Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Matthews, Greenaway, Vincent McGregor, abstentions? Councillor Mertens, that's carried. So councillors will consider that at the end of the meeting. I'll go to the first item, item 2.2, Planning Proposal 81/2015 for 893, the Entrance Road, Wombrel. Yes, we will call Councillor Hogan. I did call for leave of absence. We might do that as a procedural at the end, Councillor Holstein, just to wrap that one up. If you can remember to do that, that would be great. Have we sent somebody to get Councillor Hogan? Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillors, I'll move the deferral that appears on your screen. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor McGregor. Any discussion or debate? I'll put the motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGregor. All in favour? Councillor Matthews, Mertens, Sundstrom, Greenaway, Gail Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Vincent McGregor, Hogan, Best and Smith. Carried. Councillors, the next item is item 4.1, Records Management Policy and Procedure for Councillors. I do have a motion on the screen. which is not that one, which was to defer that item for a briefing on the records management policy and procedure. For a briefing to councillors and finalisation of the forms and frequently asked questions. So I will move that way. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Matthews. Any discussion or debate? Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question on that. With it being delayed to a briefing, what would be a rough time frame? You know, what are we looking at in terms of when we could actually have the briefing and get on top of that?
Through the CEO to Mr Hutchings.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I think the next briefing session or the one after, there may be some time available to get a quarter of an hour, 20-minute briefing done at that time on that matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Any further discussion or debate? Then I'll put that motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Matthews. All in favour? Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sundstrom, Greenaway, Gale, Collins, Pillar, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Vincent, McGregor, Hogan, Beston, Smith. Carried. The next item is Terrigal Boardwalk. I have a motion that I will be moving up on the screen, and I believe Councillor Holstein, you're seconding? Yep. Yep, so I might just introduce this motion, Councillor Sundstrom, and then I'll go to your amendment. So, councillors, just looking at the motion as it appears on the screen, it is quite lengthy. It was circulated to councillors prior to the meeting. There is just one minor change to the one that you've seen, and I'll discuss that in a minute. But councillors, in essence, this motion seeks to agree to the funding agreement and the proposed Terrigal Boardwalk, but it introduces a number of provisions and conditions to address some of the issues that have been raised by the community and in consultation period. I will just speak to it briefly. I have to say I've found this a very difficult issue. Our community is quite divided on the Terrigal Boardwalk matter, and if there was an overwhelming majority one way, it would be an easier decision. So I do have mixed feelings about the Boardwalk proposal, but I do think that we should proceed with the funding agreement. Some of the key things in this resolution that I would draw your attention to. Firstly, there has been some concern about the amount of funding to be committed by Council, being around about $2.9 million. One of the things that I've included in this resolution is that 1.6 of that comes from the Terrigal Tourism Levy. So I know there has been some concern that the $2.9 million could be spent in other areas of the Central Coast. What this motion does is ensure that that $1.648 million can only be spent in Terrigal, and therefore it is an appropriate and valid expenditure of it to go towards this project. Some of the other things in that motion as it appears on the screen, I know there has been concern that the project may blow out in price, and so the resolution includes a fixed price contract to make sure that that does not occur. Some of the things noted in Part 6, again, the community has expressed concern about the visual attractiveness of that rocky bluff where the boardwalk is going to go around. So this motion guarantees that there will be no significant removal of or disturbance of that cliff face, that some of those stunning erosion of that cliff face will not be affected, and there will be no intended vegetation removal. It also looks at ensuring that the boardwalk protects the intertidal rock platform down at the Haven. It also seeks to provide access to the rock platform. So again, I recognise that this will not be quite the same as it currently is and is not going to satisfy everybody that is concerned about it, but from the boardwalk there will be access to the rock platform that people often say they wish to retain access to. It also looks to ensure that at the Haven Beach there is a piered structure that allows tidal movement on the beach. It looks at ensuring that the materials minimise shading of the macroalgae, and that was noted in the REF. And I have added a Part 7. I know some residents have raised concerns about potential heritage, so Part 7 states that Council investigate any heritage significance of the rock platform and work with the funding body to accommodate any heritage considerations. So on that basis, I commend that motion to you. Councillor Holstein, if you wish to speak as seconder before I go to Councillor Sundstrom's amendment. Thank you, Councillor Holstein. Councillor Sundstrom, you have a possible amendment. Let me just get your microphone.
Do we need to formally get a seconder?
It looks like that's being seconded by Councillor McGregor. Councillor Sundstrom.
Okay, so I'll just give the councillors an opportunity to read the amendment, if we like. Okay.
Councillor Sundstrom.
Right, so I rise to put forward this amendment with the knowledge that that what has been proposed already has divided our community. And I note that the Mayor has also mentioned that, and as have our speakers in the forum this afternoon. I'm sick and tired of being part of a council that keeps on going back to issues that divide the community. And I think that this amendment goes a long way towards uniting our community and giving a common benefit. So with this amendment, it will accelerate existing and upcoming projects that are either already underway or about to commence. It will provide a greater benefit over the whole local government area. It will address all abilities access issues in multiple locations, benefiting multiple communities, and it will help present the Central Coast as a region that is serious about addressing real existing disability issues. I think it's a much better usage of the funds that we're talking about. I think that presenting the Central Coast as an area that welcomes and in fact makes life better for people that do have disability issues is vital to the good conduct of this council, and I commend the motion to you all.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor McGregor, did you want to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, when we talk about the boardwalk dividing the community, I think we get a bit caught up talking about the various petitions that are being circulated around. We talk about the community as a whole of the Central Coast, let alone in Terrigal itself, and I think that the evidence is quite clear from the correspondence that we've had and from the coverage of this issue that it's not so much a 51-49, it's far more, it's a far bigger split than that. And like one of the speakers said, it really does depend on how you word things. But if we can move beyond that, if we look at the sum of the 2.9 million, that is not an insignificant sum, which can be spent on benefiting projects across the Central Coast, across the different wards. So if you talk about the Park Tree Pathway project that's come up, the Norah Head Rock Pool area, the Kincumber to Avoca Pathway, there's Tuggerawong. There's several projects that are already existing that people would like to see finished or maybe haven't quite started yet. They'd like to see us get a move on with them, which I believe would be far more beneficial than spending this entire lump sum solely on the Terrigal project. There still is that 1.6 million that you talked about. It's not a matter of if or but, one or the other. It's a matter of actually having more than one option. It's a multiplicity of options, and it's about delivering for the whole of the Central Coast across multiple wards and across multiple projects, rather than just one single one. I don't anticipate that this resolution will be successful tonight, this amendment. However, I do believe that the whole of the Central Coast community would benefit far more from this, as well as our Central Coast economy, if we're looking at the tourist dollar, if we're looking at spreading that money around across the coast, across the suburbs, across the region as a whole, rather than benefiting that one cafe owner at the end of the Terrigal boardwalk. Rather than speaking to the original motion from the Mayor Smith, which will probably end up being the successful one, I would like to say that we should be focusing on things that are benefiting the biggest amount of people possible, that are going to have the biggest impact on the regional economy and on the community. And I feel that the Terrigal project, there's a reason why it hasn't gone ahead with over 20 years of trying to progress it. We look at the economic argument, we look at the geotechnical argument, we look at all these things. It is going to blow out in costs. I have real doubts about it being completed on time and on budget. And I believe that these are more tangible things that are in this resolution, the amendment that's on the screen. These are more in line with community expectation of what council should be doing, and I'd like to see it passed. In the event that it's not, well, then we get back to the other one. I won't be speaking on that. I've put my position forward on both, but I would encourage my colleagues to support this amendment. It doesn't preclude you from progressing the boardwalk. It just means that the rest of the Central Coast will get its fair share and that we'll see broader benefits region-wide rather than on one specific project for one specific suburb. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillors, do I have any speakers against the amendment? Councillor Holstein. Councillor Vincent, what's your point of order?
Community members watching the podcast at the moment are saying that what's on the screen here is skewed and they can't see it. So is there any chance, staff, or we can check that podcast and try and get it so that the online viewers can see what we're debating?
Councillor Vincent, I don't know whether it's a point of order, but I'm sure staff will certainly look at that and see if they can
I didn't know how to
that.
get it to your attention quick enough.
Okay.
So I'll just...
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. So staff will attend to that. Councillor Holstein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll talk against the amendment and I'll also talk in favour of the motion that you've put. Firstly, can I say the sentiment of Councillor Sundstrom, I understand and I appreciate where you're trying to come from and spread the love. Unfortunately, it'd be very unusual circumstances for a government who have allocated to a certain project to then agree to divide that up and move it. I've never seen that in my time in council. When they give money towards a project...
Councillor Holstein, I believe Councillor Sundstrom is probably just going to clarify with you that
He's
motion...
clarifying our share of the funding.
Yeah. Okay.
I am. Sorry, you're right. You are right. We could take our share and then go spread that out. But wouldn't we do that normally in our budgetary process as we all come together as councils and look for those projects? Why suddenly now are we saying that we need these areas? We should have been putting those up in projects within the budgetary session that we've just gone through. But I don't support the amendment because there is a benefit to be come to the council at the moment of nearly $6 million here in works. Look, the talk has been around for decades. You're quite correct. Several of the council have mentioned. It's been aspects of safety, access, stabilisation, tourism benefit. So what's been different? The difference is now that there's funding being made available. So now that funding is available, we can always say where the money could be better spent. Over 2 decades of experience have shown me that every time we get government funding, when that money is forthcoming for any particular project, there will be a litany of people saying, better spent here, better spent there. You should put the money to this project, not that project. And those lists come back to the stadium, Caroline Bay, the Art House, Peninsula Leisure Centre. There was always those people who said the money being dedicated to that could be spent better. But I've learnt this. Never give the money back to government. When you've got it, it may not be in your priority list now as being the major project. But when the funds come forward, you make the most of them. And I think that's, and I've said it here in this chamber before, I think that was one of the aspects around Winnie Bay where we got it wrong. The funds should have been taken, put in the bank, and then adjusted as we saw fit as a council to amend. But then we would have the upper hand and the better position with the funding. I support the motion from the Mayor for a range of reasons. I took the time to go out with the site inspection, and I also took the time to have a look at during the Five Lands walk on the weekend of what was happening around there. Madam Mayor, congratulated. You've actually addressed some of the issues, the fixed price tender. You've addressed the issues on some of the geotech reports. You've addressed the issues on the piers. You've addressed the issues in regard to the steps. You've addressed the issues in might well be, and I've got to say here publicly, I've never heard of Granny Rocks. And I've been around since I was 11 years old on the coast here, and I've never heard that. So you learn every time. Never heard of it. But if there's an opportunity there, the Mayor's addition to that at least leaves that covered. Councillors, money is hard to get from government, and it doesn't matter whether it's Liberal or Labor or whoever. When you get it, make the opportunity of it. Accept the funding, and then if we have to make amendment, we do. I congratulate the Mayor on at least addressing some of those issues that we saw on site, some of those things that we think we can do better. And whilst it's not ideal, I think it's a better outcome and a better opportunity for the community and for the expenditure of funds that's so needed in this community that may free up dollars elsewhere for other things to be done.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. Councillors, are there any councillors in favour of the amendment to speak? Sorry, Councillor Vincent, I'll allow you go first, speaking in favour, and then Councillor Best will take your questions.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I hear what Councillor Holstein's saying as far as if there's money there, just grab it. But you've got to look at what you're grabbing it for. And obviously, we had two speakers come in tonight, speak quite well, and raise issues of surveys, of economic justification, of loss of amenity, and what he believes is lifestyle down there at the Haven. And just to say, because someone's throwing some money at you, you should grab it and stick something in that the community doesn't want is a nonsense. So I would support this amendment put by Councillor Sudstrom, and the fact that he is looking at, and Councillor McGregor spoke strongly on it, looking to have some equity across the wards is great to have this sort of conversation coming into the chamber. So one I thank Councillor Sudstrom for sticking up for his community. Secondly, I thank him for bringing the bit of the dialogue and rhetoric in here about equity.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor Best, did you have a question?
Yeah, we might need Mr Barclay for my supplementary questions. But initially, if I can ask through you, I don't know which director. Look, as a councillor from the Forgotten North, the emerging North, the amendment that's with us is just seeking to hand back the $2.938 million. Is that correct? Is that what will happen with the $2.9 million? If we support the amendment, what happens to that money?
Through the CEO to Mr Bolgoff.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is correct.
So it's a $3 million motion we're going to vote on. That's all right. Through you to Mr Barclay.
Yes, what's your question, Councillor Best?
You better put Mr Barclay there, I suppose. My question is, Jamie, thanks for coming along. How long have you been working on this project for? Or your team?
Through you, Madam Mayor, our team has been working on this for 18 months.
A couple of years?
Yep.
Right.
18 months, Councillor Best.
Yeah, but
there was
18,
staff that were working on it.
18 months is the nice way of saying 2 years.
There were staff that were working on it 6 months before I took over.
Thank you.
My team.
So this report, which is before us on 4.3, which is not really, well, we haven't got the staff recommendation anywhere yet, but you make strong of the disability issues in the report. Will I think the motion that's alive, do you feel that it will cover off on the disability aspects as it's trying to find the balance on the visual amenity?
Councillor Best, are you talking about the original motion or you're talking about the amendment?
Well, that's the amendment up there now, correct?
Yes.
And you've moved the original motion?
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about, the original motion.
All right, thank you.
Because there's no reference ahead above your head. There is no reference to my question.
So I wonder if it should be held over until we're considering the motion, if that's successful.
Well, aren't we considering these as,
no, we're considering the
here?
amendment. So did you have another question about the amendment?
No.
Okay, thank you,
So
Mr Barclay.
I'll see you soon, Jamie.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillors, are there any, so we've had a speaker for, are there any further speakers against? Councillor McLaughlin speaking against the amendment.
Yeah, a couple of questions, if I may. If I could just clarify this, we've got a $3 million, if we don't go with this, we lose roughly $3 million, and we cannot reallocate the $1.6 million from the Terrigal Fund to the other wards, is that correct?
That's correct,
right.
Councillor
Okay, so the 2.93 that we've got to spread around isn't really 2.93, it's actually $1.3 million when you take the Terrigal money out of it. which is...
Councillor McLaughlin, the original commitment is for the 2.9.
That's right, yes,
yeah.
and the original motion was supplemented by $1.6 million from the Terrigal fund. So the actual money the council was spending was of our 2.9 was actually $1.6 million already raised in the Terrigal levies. So the real money that we're moving around now, in my calculation, is $1.3 million. And $1.3 million divided by the 5 wards is 1.3 is 200k. Is that right? So we're going to lose $3 million, and each of the wards are going to get about 200k in my calculations.
What's your point of order, Councillor McGregor?
If the amendment's successful, with the 1.6
Councillor McGregor, it's not a point of order. It's not a point of order, Councillor McGregor. If you could take a seat, please.
That's $2.3
I'm
million.
happy to clarify that for
maths.
Councillor McLaughlin. So, Councillor McLaughlin, the use of the Terrigal funds is optional, and the previous original motion identified 2.9, so that's still there in terms of the ability of council to allocate that 2.9. The use of the Terrigal tourism levy was an optional that I introduced into the previous motion. So you're not you're suggesting a mathematical calculation that could be done with the 2.9 as well.
Okay, so you can look at it either way.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's
all right. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Speakers against? Councillor Marquette.
Might speak against it. Just through you, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to get confirmation from staff. Should this be successful, not only will we send back almost $3 million to the state government, but there's been a significant investment in regards to design, consultation and the like. Could I just get confirmation again exactly what that was? How much have we spent on this so far? Because not only would we be sending $3 million back, we'd be sending that portion to the wind as well.
Through the CEO to Mr Bolgoff.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's around $440,000 that's been spent to date.
Okay, it's also another $500,000 almost. Okay, well, I'd better speak against it then, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I rise to speak against this amendment. I find it almost hilarious, to tell you the truth, that the very same firing squad that sent back over $4 million, individuals in this chamber in regards to government grants.
Councillor Marquette, I would really encourage you just to speak to the amendment that is on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Well, I'll keep pulling you up if you don't, so please
I'm
speak
sure
to
you
that.
will, Madam Mayor. I'm sure you will. What I'm trying to do, Madam Mayor, is establish that there's a pattern in the room, and I'm actually want to congratulate yourself, because you've put something up that looks adult. In this room, we're all making decisions with other
Councillor
people's money.
Marquette, I take offence at that, so how about you move on and just speak to the amendment?
I was trying to be nice, Madam Mayor. I'm trying to say that what we had was a really good thing. So, Madam Mayor, no one in any area, any suburb is ever going to agree with everything that's put in front of them. Nothing. I mean, even when I remember when Easy Streets Cafe, I think it's called, on the Gosford foreshore there, people didn't like it. People protested against a semi-temporary place that sells hot dogs to people. So it can be removed. But people didn't like it. People protested against it. That's fair enough. That's their right. What we need to do in here, we need to make decisions. We need to make adult decisions with other people's money. To send $3 million back when we've already wasted, would be wasted if this is successful, $440,000, that's adolescent, Madam Mayor. It's not a good decision. It's not good for the people of the Central Coast. They lose all that money. They lose that investment. They lose obviously the tourism benefits. The people of Terrigal are poorer. The ratepayers are poorer. Nobody wins. But it's what keeps happening in this chamber, Madam Mayor. And that's what I was trying to allude to. I was trying to say that you've put something up that I think is really responsible, and this is what is put there. Instead of everyone looking at that in its 8, 9 points, whatever it was, Madam Mayor, now, and saying, hang on, that makes sense. That's a compromise. There's some people within the community that aren't happy with this boardwalk, but we've stepped back. We're going to make sure that it's made with some different things. We're going to make sure that the cliff isn't interrupted. We're going to do these things. We're going to get the funding from a source that exists to make it a fairer spend. An adult made that decision, an adult put that up. I hope as a room we can all put our big boy pants on and move on with what's right and get this boardwalk where it needs to be. and get this money and stop wasting other people's dollars. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Marquette.
And congratulations, Madam Mayor.
Councillors, are there any further speakers in support of the amendment? Councillor Hogan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think to Jamie. So,
It's got to be Mr Barclay.
Mr Barclay, is it? Mr Barclay, is it? Jamie, can you tell the councillors whether we, as a council, applied for this funding for the boardwalk, or was it a given?
Through the CEO, Mr Barclay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, council applied for it through the Regional Environment and Tourism Fund. We were through round one, we submitted an application, we were then approved to move from phase 1 to phase 2, where we were requested to provide detailed estimates and a business case behind it, and that was submitted, and then we were successful with the funding.
So we did extensive community consultation at the time?
Not at that point. So community consultation commenced after, because we had to get the business case approved, and then that was then part of, we can't execute the funding deed without having completed community consultation, which we've now concluded.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Thank you. Councillor Hogan, are you speaking on that? Councillor Greenaway, did you want to speak on this?
My light's actually been flashing since the very first motion was put up, so...
Are you speaking on the amendment or the...
No, I'm just still waiting
Thank
to
you.
get back to that
Councillor
one.
Sundstrom, did you want to close debate on the amendment?
I'm still on.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'd just like to address some of the matters, the new matters that were brought up in those that are opposing this motion. There's discussion about money that's been handed back to the state government. We're all well aware here that the money doesn't arrive in council coffers until a project's at a go-ahead stage. Winnie Bay never got to a go-ahead stage. No money was handed back on Winnie Bay. This project, no money has arrived in council coffers from the state government at this stage. So if it doesn't go ahead, no money will be handed back. Money may be difficult to get from the government, but when it's for a project that divides a community and destroys a wonderful natural aspect, the last natural aspect to Terrigal Beach, then that money's not a gift, it's a burden. I think you already addressed it, Madam Mayor, as well, the discussion about the 1.6 for the Terrigal Tourism Fund. This motion doesn't talk about that money at all, and it won't be affected by this motion if it gets carried. That money will still be there and still be able to be used for the purpose that it was collected. I just would like to urge all of the councillors in this room to consider the fact that the project got underway under administration. There was no community consultation. It got to a stage where it has a life of its own, and it's up to this council to pull the reins in on projects that don't meet community expectations, that don't meet community needs, and that divide the community. So I'm calling the councillors to support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillors, I will put the amendment moved by Councillor Sundstrom, seconded by Councillor McGregor. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Mertens, Sundstrom, Vincent, McGregor and Hogan. Those opposed? Councillor Gale, Collins, Greenaway, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Best and Smith. The amendment is lost. Is there any further debate on the motion, the original motion? Councillor Greenaway, were you wanting to speak or ask a question on that?
Yes, I did. One question firstly, in the original motion you gave us later this afternoon, there was an item 7 that I think has been substituted by a different item 7. I just wondered
Not
why.
Substituted, just added. So I added in...
Is it still there? So it should go to 9 now, shouldn't it?
Scroll, where are we up to? We're on... yeah, that's the motion.
So can you go down?
So the difference is I added.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay,
Yep.
I just looked at it and couldn't say it before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do have a. Is it going to be debated? I'll wait till the debate now.
Well, no, we're in debate now. So, did you want to debate, Councillor Greenaway?
Just very briefly, this matter is just one of the most horrendous ones we've had in the sense of dividing the community. I can't claim to have ever had anything to do with the creation of that beautiful headland there, but I certainly won't put my name to the destruction of it, and that's what I believe will happen when you put a boardwalk across it. Also, I think when you arrive on council in 2017, as we all did, and this matter's already been somehow put on the agenda, we're not responsible for it in the fact that we didn't have any input into it. We didn't drive the application for the funding, so we should not feel any pressure to go ahead with it just because someone else put it in train, someone else has been responsible for spending $400,000 on the concept plans and things like that. We just have to be responsible for what we are leaving, and for anyone who does want to leave a beautiful rock platform as it is, they don't vote for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Gail Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to support your motion. I think it's a sensible motion. I've been out door knocking with the businesses and the residents, and I found strong support for the boardwalk in my dealings. Yes, I approve that the allocation of funds match the restart. I support the 1.6 million Terrigal tourism levy to be used. It's a great initiative. And I also support the fixed price tender so that we don't blow out. I think that's very creative and much needed. Already stated, but 440,000 already spent. This is all-inclusive tourism that I've been pushing in this chamber since I was first elected, and all-inclusive access, which is really important for the elderly, particularly in that area. And like we know, the boardwalk proposal has been on the agenda, proposed since 1996. So I would hope that our councillors, the majority in the room, do support this motion. It is sensible, and I believe the majority of our residents, not the noisy minority, actually want it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gail Collins. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise against this motion. And I felt that way from the moment I first started in council. It was one of the first issues that was raised, was this boardwalk, and I was actually quite horrified. And the reason being, and this is very much a monetary and a conscience vote for me, I grew up on the northern beaches at Narrabeen, with the sea on one side and the lake on the other, and my pastime was spent walking around headlands, collecting mussels and molluscs and looking at crabs and starfish, walking up and down the headlands from Narrabeen to Manly to Palm Beach. I believe that this boardwalk will destroy that headland. It's very small. However, it's got a beautiful aspect, and what people have talked about is their families and children enjoying that. If you put a boardwalk in front of that, visually, that's all you'll see is a metal construct. I think we've spent too much time actually pulling out the natural environment. For what reason? And I asked the question today, what was the intent of this funding and what was the purpose? To connect one end of the beach to the other? Was it? Is it for disabilities? Could be. However, is it for families? Have we truly, truly consulted with our community? And I'd certainly say no. I also oppose this because of the money, the 2.938600 mil that needs to come from the coffers of somewhere. And it's okay to say, well, 1.6 mil can come from Terrigal funds. However, we ask the community, is that what they want it spent on? I'm not sure. So I can't say yes to that. And I also cannot say yes to the other 1.3 that has to come out of our budget, when every day I drive down my street and my excuse for a bus stop is an old wooden seat that the community have put there. Otherwise they have to stand, and that's been there for 2 years. We don't have a bus stop. So when Jeff and Kyle put up this motion, I thought, well, it's a really good motion. We really need to look at what other things need to be done across our communities. We need to be looking at disability access, yes, but we do have people that are stranded up in Lake Mammoor and Park Trees Village with a lousy 500-metre stretch of concrete they need for $300,000. At the moment, we've got those people stranded, and I can't get the money out of council for that. So how can I, honestly, in all my conscience, say, yep, let's approve 1.3 million to Terrigal. I just can't do that. But first and foremost, as I said, it's about the natural environment, and people need to learn and pull back on all of this safety garb and just get out there and enjoy themselves. And that's what we need to do. I was also at the site inspection, and because for me to make an informed decision, I needed to go to that. So in closing, yes, we can accept the state money. However, I don't approve any of council's funds going to this boardwalk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Councillor Burke.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is not a thought that's just been put up 1 or 2 years ago. It goes back to 1996, 24 years ago. Gosford Council put in a plan of management. I believe this is a very good motion. I've had a look around at a lot of the places like boardwalks at Coogee, Marimbula, Curl, Freshwater, all through Queensland. And 2 weeks ago I was in Bruny Island where they've got a boardwalk of 1.2. I asked the question to one of the to the tourist people. I said, why do a 1.2 1.2 kilometre boardwalk? And they said tourism. They've got 1,000 people on this island, and the people come in droves. There was 4 busloads there at that time, and they said it's tourism. So, you know, Bruny Island, I think they've got it right. It was brought up before, we've invested $442,000 in council money in assessment, construction, and it's ready to go. We've got a grant of $2,938,000. In your motion, Madam Mayor, I find, because a lot of people that are written to us have said about 0.7, the CBD cleaning, and there's a program of litter that's going to go in, because I've been thinking about that, how are we going to get around that? And it's going to be removed on a daily basis. 0.8, which included the assets maintenance, which is going to be looked after pretty well. Now, the benefits of the boardwalk, it's going to be inclusive access, and it's going to connect the Terrigal to the Haven. There's also going to be no disability discrimination, which is a very big thing. It's going to free up a lot of car spaces. And I'm talking about 6 o'clock in the morning, when all the runners and walkers get out, and then at night when the people come down to town to go to the cafes and everything. And that's what a problem has been in Terrigal. There's always been a bottleneck there. So I believe the locals are going to win out of this. The shopkeepers are going to win. Tourism's going to be a winner. The walkers, the runners, the mothers with prams getting around there, the elderly and the people with disabilities. I'm for the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Sundstrom, are you speaking on the motion?
Yeah, I'll speak against it if it's okay, Madam Mayor.
Yep.
But can I start first with a couple of questions for staff? Through you, Madam Mayor, what involvement have local advocates for all ability access had in the design of this proposal?
Through the CEO to Mr. Barclay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, could you just repeat the question again?
The question is, what involvement have local advocates for all ability access had in the design of this proposal?
Local advocates being local groups in terms of disability?
Local groups, local people that advocate for better services for including all ability access, people with disabilities.
So council has its own internal disability access requirements. So it went through an internal review. You might remember there was a step down, that was a mesh step down in the original concept design.
Sorry, Mr. Barclay. I'm asking what local advocates for all ability access had involved in the design, not what people from inside council were involved.
None.
None, thank you. So do we know that the Terrigal Boardwalk is a high priority for people with disabilities?
I couldn't answer that.
No, okay. What consideration, maybe it's not Mr. Barclay for this one, what consideration was given to the current and historic uses of the area when the design was made?
Mr Barclay, would you like to have a go at that
So
one?
through
Sorry.
you, Madam Mayor. So the external architects certainly did a historic review of all of the history of Terrigal whilst they were going through the design review process.
It doesn't appear in the report. There's no mention in the report of Granny's Rock or the current usage where people like to go and sunbathe.
I'm in Councillor Holstein, so I didn't even know Granny Rock existed. I didn't know it was termed that, so that's new information tonight.
An investigation would have upturned that quite easily, I would have thought. Okay, I'll speak against the motion now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Barclay. Councillor Sundstrom.
Okay, the first thing I'll mention is that Professor Glenn Albrecht told us recently to wake up. Has told us recently at the inaugural Strom talk of a condition known as solastalgia, which describes a form of psychic or existential distress caused by environmental change. In my opinion, there are several reasons why over the past few decades this boardwalk has remained a proposal rather than progressing to a construction, not the least of which is a call from the community for a halt to the destruction of our natural environment. Clearly, the original concept of the boardwalk in 2009, Terrigal Land Care Master Plan of the boardwalk, has been supersized. In that master plan, it depicted a timber jetty-like construction commencing to the east of Granny's Rock. Anyone with a love of Granny's Rock and prior knowledge of that proposal may have given a nod to this proposal unwittingly due to the fact that a lack of information was provided. I contend that the community consultation process, my own investigations and the outcry of the community all indicate that the major reason for the non-progression of this proposal and its predecessors is that it does not have sufficient community support. Clearly, less than 50% of respondents commit to being very supportive. That means the rest of us have genuine reservations. I've received communications from the person who put up the Facebook survey, and she indicated to me that she understood that that was an invalid method. I have in my hands here a petition opposing the construction of the boardwalk. This petition has over 850 signatures. Objections include, but are not limited to, loss of access and destruction of the north-facing rock, affectionately known as Granny's Rock. This is a well-used and much-loved community space. Innumerable locals and visitors have used it and will hopefully continue to use this spot for rest and recreation, for adventure space for children, and even as a wedding photo destination. The rock platform provides a location unique on the coast, a flat sandstone rock platform with a sunny northerly aspect, protection from breezes, and presently an uninterrupted view to the north across land and sea all the way to Nora Head. It's a place of comfort, a place of solace, and it assists in the maintenance and recovery of mental health. Construction of the boardwalk will mean hundreds of square metres of beautiful beach will be overbuilt and no longer accessible. This beach, east of Granny's Rock, is a firm sand beach that opens onto a generally safe and gentle beach. Loss of access to the caves. Children love the caves to the east of Granny's Rock, and they have adventure and play games in there regularly. These caves afford adventure and encourage the imagination and activity of many of our youngsters. Granny's Rock and the beach and caves to its east are the last remaining natural aspects to Terrigal Beach. The emotional argument about providing all abilities access from Terrigal Beach to the haven rings hollow to me. Before we start building ornate and imposing structures to give access for all abilities to various locations...
Councillor Sundstrom, your time is up.
Can I just get about 20 or 30 seconds more, Madam Mayor?
Yep, please.
Thank you. Before we start building ornate and imposing structures to give access for all abilities to various locations, we'd be better off addressing the obstacles that beset our community members in their daily lives. Uneven pavement services, lack of disabled parking. There are only six spaces in Terrigal close by the beach for people to park in a disabled spot. Better provision of suitable public toilets, rest areas with suitable seating, accessible ramps. We need to continue the good work of staff, such as the provision of the All Abilities play space at Sean Brinklow Park in Copacabana. I stand against the destruction of this beautiful location and I recommend that all you other councillors vote this motion down.
Thank you, Councillor Sundstrom. Councillor Pillen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to support your amendment, and I commend the additions that you've made to the original motion. Everyone knows that this has been a really hard decision for myself, along with others, but it is not about emotions tonight to make decisions. Yes, I had my wedding photos there 27 years ago, so I do welcome that the fact that you've now made it possible with this amendment for people to actually go down onto the rock platform, so that should still be able to take place for people. We also heard tonight from one of the guest speakers about the weight of the community and not actually having with the surveys and not enough people surveyed. I think the fact that Adam Crouch recently won the state election with 62.3% two-party preferred, that was the second highest swing in the state, with the community full well knowing that he was in support of Winnie Bay.
Councillor Pillen, I don't really think that's appropriate for the debate. Please, if you could just stick to the boardwalk issue.
I think that is, Madam Mayor, that was given that support, and that was a weight of the community showing that. I did mention about the survey on Facebook recently, which did ask for people to do it with unbiased opinions and just to put yes or no, whether you're supportive or unsupportive, which I did. And that actually came out, I think it was a 57% positive support. Just this week, we've had a media survey from our local Regional Development Australia for the Central Coast, welcoming announcements from the New South Wales state budget and regarding infrastructure funding across the Central Coast. However, as a region, it said we need to start working together to attract critical, large-scale enabling infrastructure. Whilst I understand this isn't the large scale, but if we keep knocking back millions of dollars to the state government, it does put us at reputational risk, which we have spoken before here. And whilst there are some that obviously shaking their heads disagree, if we keep knocking back this funding, I don't know how we think that we're going to get funding down the track for things that we also want. The mention of water quality and that funding should maybe go to that instead in Terrigal, that is a separate issue, and I welcome that we do have funding for that from the state government recently looking at that, and we have just approved a subcommittee to be looking into that as well, so we can have everything for Terrigal that we've put through. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I do commend your additions such as well stabilisation and no use of concrete spray, something I really do agree with this as well. The fact that not intentionally removing the vegetation, that you've got access to the rock platform, maintaining natural tidal movement. I think you've really added some great environmental issues here to this walkway for all to be enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pillen. Councillor McGregor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just a question, perhaps best answered by yourself. There's been a lot of talk about disability access, increasing the disability or the involvement of disabled people in the area. Would a 0.9 be appropriate to look to increase disability parking in the area?
I might just seek some advice from staff through the CEO to Mr Bolgoff.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that certainly can be added, but it would need to be investigated.
Okay, happy to investigate additional. We might just go down if we could go to the bottom, and if Councillor Holstein accepts this as an amendment, that Council investigate additional, what's the appropriate term, is it?
Disabled parking.
Disabled parking in the vicinity of the proposed boardwalk. Would that satisfy?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Holstein, you're happy with that? Councillors, I don't have any further speakers, so I will just close debate. As I mentioned at the beginning, this has been a divisive issue and it's been a difficult issue for many of us. So the motion does seek to take on board some of those concerns that were raised during the consultation period. I thank the residents who met with me, and I had the opportunity to hear their concerns. Unfortunately, I know that they will be disappointed if this gets up, and I sympathise that we can't meet those expectations, but I hope some of the amendments go to some way to improve the outcome if this boardwalk proceeds. Councillors, I'll put the motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holstein. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Gale Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Best and Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sundstrom, Greenaway, Vincent, McGregor and Hogan. That's passed. Thank you, councillors. Division, I need 2 people on their feet. Thank you. So all in favour, please stand. All in favour, please stand. Councillor Gale Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Best and Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sundstrom, Greenaway, Vincent, McGregor and Hogan. Carried. Thank you. Next item, councillors, is item 4.6, the Tourism Opportunity Plan. I will be moving that. Do staff have some wording to put up on the screen? I'm not sure if I sent something through. Thank you. So as appears on the screen, that council receives a report on the Tourism Opportunity Plan, that council exhibit the plan for 60 days to allow for public consultation, and that council consider a further report on the results of the public exhibition. I will move that way. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Gale Collins. Is there any speakers in opposition? Then I'll put the motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gale Collins. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Mertens, Sundstrom, Greenaway, Gale Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Vincent, McGregor, Hogan and Smith. Carried. Next item is item 4.7, play space at Johns Road, Wadalba. Councillor McGregor.
No, you're in this one. It's the park. I'd seek to amend the resolution to have option 2 as the option that's selected, rather than option 1. So where it says council endorse option 2, just change it. Sorry, option 1, change it to option 2.
Could you just read that option out, Councillor McGregor, while the staff are getting that sorted, if you wouldn't mind? I think that's the one that allocates funding in this financial year, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Mayor. So option 2, design and construct the new Johns Road play space in 2019-20 financial year by providing additional resources to deliver these additional works as existing resources are at capacity.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor, do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Seconded, Councillor Best. Councillor McGregor?
I'm happy just to not talk to it unless there's opposition. If there is opposition, then I will explain it. Otherwise, I'm happy to go through.
Councillors, are there any speakers against? Mr Cox, did you want to make any comments in relation to this? I thought through the CEO to Mr Cox.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Just so that council's aware, we're happy to execute any resolution of the council, but just be aware, council, that the 1920 budget has been adopted, and by putting another project in does stretch staff resources again, so it does put the new budget on the back foot straight away. I'm only just flagging that as a potential impact, but as I say, we will deliver whatever the council resolve for us to deliver.
Thank you, Mr Cox. We might just need to make sure we get the wording correct up on the screen. I think it's the 2019.
So it should be 1920.
Yeah.
For the years.
Yes. All right. So, Councillor McGregor, I don't have any speakers opposed. Councillor Best has a question, so I might allow his question, and then Councillor McGregor, if you need to speak to that, you may. Councillor Best.
Through you, how much are we talking about in bringing this forward? We do have a deficit of, what is it, 20 million? No, 18.3 million deficit so far, and we haven't started.
Through the CEO to Mr Cox.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Best, money's not the issue. There's actually funds in the developer contributions plans to fund this. It just comes down to resourcing and delivery, that's all. So.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cox. Councillors, I don't have any speakers against, so I'll put the motion moved by Councillor McGregor, seconded by Councillor Best. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sundstrom, Greenaway, Gale Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Vincent, McGregor, Hogan, Best and Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Marquette, that's carried. Thank you. Next item is item 7.1, notice of motion, Gosford Cultural Precinct. Councillor Best.
Get to the page number 200 and...
Seconded Councillor Marquette. Councillor Holstein is leaving the room.
224. Is there... I've got that vehicle slogan one up there. I haven't got past that one yet.
Councillor Best, are you moving a motion or just muttering to yourself?
Yes, I've moved it as it's been seconded. Is there any opposition? I mean, surely.
Are there any speakers against? Councillor Greenaway, are you wishing to speak against?
Question for staff, so just...
if we could go to Councillor Greenaway's question, then we can ascertain whether it needs...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, I'm not sure if Councillor Best made it to the briefing, but it was during the briefing that I asked, I think it was Director of Governance, about or it may have been actually Mr Murphy, regarding what the current situation is in relation to this matter. And I believe there are some developments due later this week that we aren't able to provide an update on yet, but certainly we will be able to in due course. So I was just wondering if either of those gentlemen could elaborate on what was said in the briefing.
I might go to the CEO, Mr Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Councillor Greenaway, yes, that is correct. I think your summation of what was discussed at the briefing. So what was indicated was that there are a number of resolutions relating to this matter which have been made public, and there are some negotiations that are currently underway, and we expect that a decision from a third party is likely to be made later this week, and that third party would then refer their determination back to council, and then we can consider that determination.
Sorry, Councillor Greenaway, just...
If we were to vote for this, because as far as I know, we're all in favour usually of transparency and openness with the residents, but I just wondered if we vote for this tonight, we won't actually be able to provide that public update just yet. Is that correct?
Mr Murphy.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Greenaway, we will be able to provide some information. As I said, we can provide what is publicly available, we can provide a timeline, but I also note that the recommendation as it stands does not specify a particular time frame, so it may be a question for the mover, but staff will certainly do whatever we can to accommodate any resolution passed by council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenaway. So, Councillor Best, I don't have any speakers against, so you're happy for me to put the motion?
I think on the back of Councillor Greenaway's tremendous contribution, my seconder raised an issue which I'd like to offer up, if I could, please, ladies, the other part of this, and I'll speak to it then. Thank you.
We do. It's just not on the screen. Councillor Marquette is the seconder. Councillor Best, give us a hint on what
here it comes.
Where you're heading.
The lady, I've got it all typed. We're ready to go? Okay. And I thank Councillor Greenaway for raising this point. I think it's a very good point. I mean, we did think the time for consultation was over, but now we know it's maybe back on again. So that's two, that council orders be engaged to examine the cultural precinct with a view to reporting to council around risks in relation to acquisition, capital, construction costs, and the 10-year scenario and depreciation. And I'll speak to that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Best, I am just going to get some advice. That seems a distinctly different motion to the one that was put on the business paper, and I would query whether it's appropriate to put that to the meeting with no notice. I can amend my own motion, Madam Mayor. I have every right you can't if it's distinctly different from your original motion.
It's not. My seconder? Thank you. Transparency, I think, is what you're looking for. That's point two. No, that's point two. That's 1 and 2. Ladies, could we have 1 and 2 up, please, as is? Thank you. Evan, it's 1 and 2.
Councillor Best, the advice is if you put it as a point 2, then you can speak to it, and let's see how you go.
Well, it always was going to be point 2. So can we just let everybody digest it now? There we go. Right. Okay, I'll speak to it. Thank you. Councillors, I did raise this over a year ago where we sought PricewaterhouseCoopers to give us some guidance around the project. This is likely to be the largest civil project in Australian local government history. We have multiple iterations of this development, as we know, and I think that it's time that consultation was almost dead, but now it's alive again. Where we go back to the community, because this has grown. It has grown extraordinarily over the last year or so. I've got some figures from the construction industry. When you're looking at hospital multi-storey, it's $5,500 a square metre. You look at city hall developments, they're $5,200 per square metre, and town halls, $4,000 a square metre. They're the rates that you attribute to per square metre of the floor space of this building. When you multiply out the square metre rate of this facility and the magnitude of the facility on the back of my lunch wrapper, we all know that we're heading north of $200 million. So if we're doing that, the public need to be engaged now, and not at some future date. And I understand what Mr Murphy was saying a moment ago, and I certainly won't go to that territory because that is a confidential matter, but we are not going to be hamstrung by a small land acquisition issue. This should be happening now. Our auditors should be engaged. We should be trying to understand the costing scenarios for going forward. The figures to run the Wyong Arts Centre are around $1 million a year. This facility, the size of it, it's got to be $5 million in depreciation, and it's got to be another $5 million to run it. And they're my figures, they're nobody else's, but they're the kinds of figures you're looking at, about $10 million to run this thing every year. Now, if we're moving into those kinds of figures, I think we need to get to the community now and share the view. We just did this with the Terrigal walkway. We were critical of ourselves here, saying that we hadn't consulted. Well, this is not what we started with, and it's time to consult more seriously and put on the table the realities of what we're doing here. This is an enormous project. As I say, it is the largest civil project in local government history. And the way the numbers are rolling, there is really no hysteria around this getting to $250 million development. Now, you could break that development up into 5 parcels, put $50 million into every single ward, and you could deal with every single bit of infrastructure backlog in this whole region and still have change. We just talked about breaking up the Terrigal walkway into wards, and that was an argument just a moment ago. Imagine spending $50 million to each ward if you get to that ridiculous figure of $250 million. Now, they're my figures. They're not figures of anyone's rigour, but if you look at the standard industry figures multiplied out by square metre rate, you come up with some interesting mathematics. So I think we should share that with the public. We're doing a lot in confidential. We need to open the door.
Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Best, there has just been some discussion that your additional part 2 involves further expenditure of council funds. And you'll recall that we adopted the Code of Meeting Practice last meeting, which indicated that when there's additional expenditure of funds, that a report should come back to council. Okay, so are you happy with item 2 that council requests the CEO provide a report on engaging an auditor? On the cost of engaging an auditor to examine the Gosford Cultural Precinct, and that then the rest of your sentence would be appropriate. So you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I actually argued that same point when we did the airport investigation. It didn't cost that, so I think it's good.
Lucky that got in before the Code of Meeting Practice. Councillor Marquette, are you happy to accept that as the seconder?
Yes, I am, Madam Mayor, but I would ask, is it possible to add a time frame on that when that would come back?
Let me just check with the CEO.
Because it's in the never, I'm not happy.
Councillor Best, Oh, it's disappeared. Last meeting in August. It would be the earliest. Provide a report at the last meeting in August on the cost. Thank you, Councillor Best. Councillor Marquette, are you wishing to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, at work I use an internet-based tendering program that lets me know every single project in Queensland, New South Wales and the ACT that's either in planning or in construction at the moment or the like. I just had a little bit of a play around with that last week, and what we're talking about here, the largest number I could find at the moment was just over 100 mil. We're talking about the possibility.
Councillor Marquette, again, I would just caution you that there is a body of information that has been discussed in confidential that it's not appropriate to disclose or even intimate or seek to imply.
I couldn't disagree. I couldn't agree more, Madam Mayor. I'd totally agree. I wasn't doing that. What I'm saying is there's the largest scale project we've got there at the moment is about 101 million I could find. That's nothing to do with anything we spoke about in that. That's in a totally different council I won't even mention. But the industry figures that do exist, that Councillor Best just mentioned, which are accurate in my opinion, do take it double that amount. So I'm not saying any figures that were mentioned in confidential. But what I do want to do, what I do hope that all councillors agree we should do, is bring into the light what we can now. Because we all know in this place that this thing has snowballed. This thing has snowballed to now to a number, an undisclosed number, Madam Mayor, that I am not comfortable with in any facet. Now, I keep hearing wax lyrical about the inequity of wards. I hear it in everything. If we're buying a packet of PK, there's people in this room that want to make sure each ward's getting 2 pieces. But then this is my ward, Madam Mayor. I'd love to say, let's spend 20 trillion in my ward. But this is ridiculous. Our kids will be paying this off. Again, other people's money. Now, we need to take a deep breath here. We need to realise it's great. We've heard...
Councillor Sundstrom, what's your point of order?
Time. Lost about 40 seconds. Yes.
The councillor is discussing the merits of the proposal rather than this motion before us. I think he should stay on track and talk about this proposal rather than referring to, and quite precariously, I might add, I'm concerned that there are figures and other bits of information being mentioned that may be...
Councillor Sundstrom, it's not a point of order, but Councillor Marquette, you do need to stay on the motion and...
I think I definitely was, Madam Mayor.
Please,
I was talking about transparency, Madam Mayor, which
Marquette.
no Councillor Sundstrom wouldn't understand.
Councillor Marquette.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really appreciate it. Oh, Jesus.
Councillor Sundstrom, what's your point of order?
Councillor Marquette just suggested that I wouldn't understand transparency. He's reflecting on me in that way. I don't appreciate it. Like to withdraw.
Councillor Marquette, I would ask you withdraw your intimation if you could, please.
Madam Mayor, I would never want to hurt Councillor Sundstrom's feelings. I'll withdraw, absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Marquette. If you could wrap it up, please.
I feel very bad. No, I can't wrap it up, Madam Mayor. I should still have 1 minute and 35. I've barely started.
No, you don't, Councillor Marquette. Keep going.
I said I should have, that's right. Madam Mayor, what I'm trying to allude to here is that we've got a responsibility. We don't just have a responsibility for the now, we've got a responsibility for tomorrow. We need to take the Central Coast residents along this ride. If we want to spend more money than anyone in this room will ever see, if they put all their relatives together with them, then what we need to do is make sure that people want us to go in that direction. We need to put some light on this. No, Madam Mayor, we can't say things that are in confidential, but everything we had in confidential at the last meeting, there was a ton of it that could go out to the people. We need to make sure the people of the Central Coast want us to do what's happening here. If you want each ward to be equal, if everyone in here wants all these wards to be equal, like we keep trying to split up to push us against each other, at this very moment right now, let's let the people of the Central Coast think. Let's let people in that magical forgotten north or out at the entrance to see if they want to spend this massive figure or if they want the scale.
Thanks, Councillor Marquette. Your time is up.
For God's sake, the time for
take a seat, Councillor Marquette. Councillor Vincent, are you speaking on this?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll try and not... know what the word is. I won't say it in here. I'd rise to support this motion. I rise to support the motion based on there is the need to communicate with the public on where we're at. There is the need for us to be able to assess the risks that we're looking at and maybe how we've come to this point in time. And if it isn't already, it probably should be nearly the number one risk that we're looking at in council. And I think water's another issue, but we're managing that in different ways. But to have a reality check, to hear back from the Chief Financial Officer, who is the project sponsor for this group, to hear back from the PCG, the Project Control Group, who would have views collectively that they could feed through the Chief Executive Officer. It would be good to have that reality check at this point in time, just to see if we're in the right place. I'd be happy to see that report sooner than later, but I do firmly believe that the people of Gosford need a library, they need a community space, and they've been paying a special rate levy for, I hope Councillor Richard will give us the facts on this, but I think 5 to 10 years or 15 years, you put on the record when you talk, but they definitely deserve to have a decent library and a space built. The reality check here that we're having, I think is very healthy, considering the possible scale that this may be and the commitment that the council as a whole would be making. So I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillors, are there any speakers against? Then I'll put the motion moved by Councillor Best, seconded Councillor Marquette. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sunstrom, Greenaway, Gale, Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Burke, Marquette, Vincent, McGregor, Hogan, Best and Smith. Carried. Councillors, we'll just invite Councillor Holstein back in. Councillors, item 7.2, notice of motion kayaking, canoeing, tourism opportunities. I will move the motion when it comes up on the screen. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor McGregor. Councillor Holstein, you start this. You had something to consider?
It was only to ask for an inclusion that related back to our Tourism Advisory Committee too, as part of the process for them to have that as part of their considerations or assessment as well.
Yes, if we could just go down the screen, I'm happy for, if we insert just before the current part 4 that that the matter be also referred to the Tourism Advisory Committee for their input.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yep, Councillor McGregor, you're happy with that? Do I have any speakers against? I'll put the motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGregor. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sunstrom, Greenaway, Gale, Collins, Billen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Vincent, McGregor, Hogan, Best and Smith. Carried. Councillors, we have one item remaining, which is the volunteer section 355 committees. Could I take a motion that we move into confidential to consider?
Councillor Holstein. Of leave.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Holstein.
I missed when you called for leave, and I do need to put on the record.
So we will just take a procedural to recommit that or to consider that.
To recommit leave of absence.
So you're doing that. So Councillor Holstein, you're just noting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to draw attention to the council. I seek leave of absence for medical reasons from the 30th of July to the 25th of August.
Thank you, Councillor Holstein. So I'll move that be noted and accepted. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Gale Collins. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. A motion to move into confidential to consider item 4.4, volunteer section 355 committees. Do we have a mover? Move Councillor Holstein, seconded Councillor Best. All in favour? Any opposed? So we might just do that vote again, please, councillors. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Matthews, Merton, Sunstrom, Gale, Collins, Pillen, McLaughlin, Holstein, Burke, Marquette, Best and Smith. Those opposed? Councillor Greenaway, Vincent and McGregor. That's carried. I will just wait for the gallery to leave and for the staff to confirm that the live streaming has been turned off and the door. Can I just check with the staff whether we're back live streaming? Thank you. Councillors, I will just ask the CEO to read the resolution of council from the confidential matter. Once I get councillors... Councillor Best. Thank you. Shh. Mr Murphy. Sorry.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Council resolved in confidential session 1 that Council note this report on Section 355 committees and the ongoing community facilities review. 2, that Council resolved to delegate functions to the 17 Section 355 committees for the care, control and management of the relevant 17 council facilities as per the Local Government Act 1993. So the Berkeley Road Sports Complex, Budgie Boy Scout Hall, Chain Valley Bay Community Hall, Chittaway Point Hall, Kincumber School of Arts, Colnera Memorial Hall, Lake Munmora and District Senior Citizens Centre, San Remo Neighbourhood Centre, Surrey Park Community Hall, St Barnabas Church, Summerland Point Community Hall, Tukli District Art and Tourist Centre, Tukli Neighbourhood Centre, Tuggerah Community Hall, Tuggerah Retirement Village, Tonkawalan Park Hall, Wyong Old School Community Centre, and 3, Council note that a further report will be presented and considered following the completion of the Community Facilities Review with recommendations of the future of Section 355 committees.
Thank you, Mr Murphy. That's the completion of the meeting, councillors. Meeting is closed. Thank you. Councillor Vincent, in line with the new Code of Meeting Practice, you need to submit them in writing prior to the meeting. I will just clarify with...